Hello, everyone. Welcome to Eternal Card Breakdowns. I am Pojo, and this is Tesya, the Omen Shaper. We have just been presented with an exciting new promo card for today. So, for the next, I think, 2-3 weeks probably, you can play games, and if you win a game, you'll get a free copy of Tesya. About 8 hours later, the next game that you'll play, you will be able to get another free copy of Tesya until you have all 4 of them. And after that, you'll be able to craft this card. It looks like it's a fairly, well, no, this is the premium version. Should be able to craft it for fairly cheap. I believe it crafts for 400. So yeah, promo cards are a lot of fun, and this one is no exception. This is a really interesting card for a bunch of different reasons. I want to talk about this in a couple of different forms, but first things first, I just want to say that I really like the Praxis Arcanum. As like a faction in Eternal, this is one of the ones that hits the best for me. The time faction of like sort of seeking knowledge, fiddling around with time. Like, these guys are just sort of the nerds of Eternal, and they do a really good job with it. The older ones make it really look good. The sort of younger ones make it look really fun, like cards like Marison's Disciple and Humbug Swarm, where you have like sort of the playing around with the bugs. Cards like Hipshot, where you see people who are members of the Praxis Arcanum or rebels of the Praxis Arcanum that are just like doofing around with magic. And then like at the top you have Telir, the Fate Touch, or not Telir, the Fate Touched, goodness. You have Telir, you have Marison, and you have Tesya, and all 3 of them are just the raddest, like, awesome ladies. Like, these people have like really cool designs. They're all like really focused on some particular aspect of knowledge, or like some particular field of study, but all of them are sort of like messing around with time and doing like a really interesting job with it. So the leaders of the Praxis Arcanum are pretty cool, and it's cool to have another character in that sort of vein. And amongst that, like, we have essentially one of the best pieces of art for Eternal. This is one of my favorites for a lot of different reasons. Like, I just really like the way that Tesya is designed. I like just all the things that are going on with her costuming and with what she's doing in like the little astronomy lab. I think this card is just really neat. Like, there's a lot going on here, and I'm just a big fan of the art. So yeah, all of that out of the way first. This card won with me pretty easy. I'm very happy to have like a cool time mage, and I'm always glad to see more members of the Praxis Arcanum. But anyways, let's talk about the stats on the card, shall we? 7 costs 7/6. This is a mage, which isn't a tribal in any aspect. Like, there currently are tribal explorers, but we don't really have anything that does anything with mages yet. That might be something in set 3, so, there are enough mages now that in a month or so we might see something that actually affects mages, and that could be kind of interesting. But 7/6. So 7/6 for 7 is a relatively efficient stat line, not particularly amazing. 7 costs, you generally see them as being 7/7s or 7/6s. Sometimes you see them as 6/6s with really useful abilities. Tesya is somewhere in the middle. She has the 7 power, which means that she does pressure on essentially a 4-turn clock instead of a 5-turn clock. 7 damage is the difference between 28 and 24 in 4 turns. So as a top deck, 7 damage units are a little bit more useful. It's not a huge jump from 6, but it's important to have. And then on the 6 side, that is just enough health that Obliterate still kills them. It's a fairly vulnerable amount for a 7 drop, but it's not too bad. It's actually a really decent amount of health. It's going to survive most things, including, of course, Sandstorm Titan, which is one of the main things that you want to be able to block. Does die to Obliterate, but overall, that's a pretty hardy unit. That's, it's a beefy thing that's going to survive if it sticks on the board. And in addition, it is a card with warp. Cards with warp that are also big dudes just tend to be really good top decks. So Tesya is a really good card to be sort of pulling out later in the game, but she also has some interesting things going on early. So let's talk about her abilities. Tesya has warp. And when you play another unit while Tesya is on top of your deck, which you can see because she has warp, that unit gets +1/+1. This is a dead giveaway that you have Tesya on top of your deck, so your opponent can now do silly things like, I don't know, steal it with Pilfer. But it's still kind of a pretty neat ability, and the singular effect of it is actually strong enough that I think that that's a reasonable thing to have. Just because it is giving you that extra free +1/+1, that can be very useful in a lot of different aspects. And like, there are a lot of things that I jumped to when I was thinking about Tesya, because like there are certainly a lot of things that you can do with tokens and with other things, but actually the thing that really interests me here is that just standard big Praxis is going to be running Dawnwalkers, and if you're playing Dawnwalkers, then you do play those units from your Void. So if you have Tesya on top of your deck, you can play a 6-drop of some kind. You can play out a Dawnwalker. The Dawnwalker gets +1/+1, which is extremely good for Dawnwalker, and your 5/5 gets +1/+1. So just in like sort of big Praxis mid-range, this card has some interesting applications that might be fun to play around with. And it is a warp card, so it's going to be card advantage on the top. The thing I really like about this, of course, is that if you have, say, a Heart of the Vault on top of your deck, and you play Heart of the Vault into Dawnwalker, and Heart of the Vault is going to draw a Tesya, then the Heart of the Vault will get +1/+1, the Dawnwalker will get +1/+1, and then the Tesya will be cheaper and in your hand, which is, you know, just a really cute sequence of events. That's just a fun thing that happens. Yeah, this effect is pretty minimal, but it is actually very meaningful. And because it's a permanent +1/+1 bonus, it really applies well in any sort of situation where you have recursion. So Xenon decks in particular are going to have a lot of fun with this type of thing. I think that Killer Dawnwalkers is a really interesting option for it. Another one that I think will be really interesting is Ephemeral Wisp, a card that plays whenever you play a power. So there are ways that you can easily cheat out multiple units that don't involve just playing tokens, although we're certainly going to talk about this in terms of tokens, because there's that other summon effect. Your other units get +1/+1. This is a really minor summon effect for a card of this size, but the card is doing enough on its own. Even though it is somewhat stat inefficient, it is building enough of a threat on board that it's absolutely worth it to just have a little bit of extra stuff tacked on this. Like, not only is this a card that is effectively drawing you a card if you draw it late, but if you play it down, you also get that extra bonus, and you get the unit that is just really quite meaningful. So yeah, I think Praxis Tokens has a really decent chance at making this card work, because Praxis Tokens can play a lot of different units all at once. So you can play something like Assembly Line, and that plays the tokens out, which means that they do get +1/+1 off of Tesya, giving you some 2/2 units. If you're playing a Praxis deck with Obelisk, then obviously you're going to have other ways to buff those things up. Cards like Scouting Party, yeah, the Combre party list that was very, very popular, and I believe was one of the top finishers. I can't remember if Kamado was playing a particularly Praxis-y, a particularly Combre party list, but a lot of Combre party lists made it into the top 16 and were actually like set up in the Worlds tournament pretty recently. So Combre party with Tesya Omen Shaper will allow you to make essentially 2/2s just immediately without any particular like sort of problems there. And that's kind of an interesting aspect. I think that that's something that could be really cool in terms of just running around with tokens. And then on top of that, you get the second +1/+1 bonus when you play Tesya, which is just a very minor buff that gives you essentially an unlock potential on top of a unit. Unlock potential is not really all that bad a card, especially when it's free. So like this is actually a really interesting way to get your units up in size and really start pushing them over your opponent in ways that are pretty scary. Yeah, so that's like sort of the initial evaluation. I think that obviously Praxis Tokens has some interesting styles to play with her, and recursive decks, particularly Dawnwalker recursion, are really going to have an interesting time with her. There are some other things that are pretty cool about her, and I'm going to speculate a little bit about some other decks that she might belong in. The one that I'm really interested in playing around with Tesya in is Crown of Possibilities decks, because Crown of Possibilities decks will have some amount of Destiny units, which is fairly nice, not amazing for Tesya, but can be kind of okay. The main thing, however, is that those are the decks that run Excavate and Second Sight, which allow you to put Tesya on top of your deck before you play another unit, and then as a result, you'll also be able to give Tesya some skills. You might wait until she's warpable, or you could just sort of continue to build up her skills, because she's a perfectly good unit to get skills on with Crown of Possibilities, while at the same time you're playing out much more meaningful Clock Roaches or Piercing Griefs or anything along those lines where you're just like trying to add a bunch of skills onto a unit. You're giving those units extra defense by playing Second Sight first. And that's an interesting concept that I'm actually kind of interested in fiddling around with. So yeah, feels pretty happy. So yeah, overall, I'm pretty net positive on Tesya. The main drawbacks to her and the things that you have to watch out for are that she is very expensive. She's at the same cost as Champion of Mystery, but I think that she has similar in-game impact in terms of both generating a threat and also giving you some interesting ways to create board advantage and create card advantage. But all of those things are really quite relevant. Champion of Mystery can do certain of those things a lot more consistently, but only after you've met a significant influence requirement. Whereas Tesya is doing that kind of thing for the Praxisy decks and doing that kind of thing for Elysian decks, and I think that there are some interesting options where she might actually be able to play out a lot better in those situations. You can use her with cards like Nesting Avasor, which is kind of an interesting concept. I don't believe that she will buff Nesting Avasor if you use Nesting Avasor to put her on top, but she will buff your next unit if you have a follow-up. So if you want to do like sort of big dino aggro, there's some interesting things with Tesya where she's going to be buffing up like the Marison, or not the Marison, Evelina, the Valley Searcher, and then like you're going to be trying to play a lot of very small, cheap dinosaurs like Teriax hatchlings with Tesya out or Tesya on top, so that you can just do some really cool things with that. So yeah, I think there are a lot of interesting decks to try her out in. I encourage people to go out and play with her as much as possible. We're going to be playing with her a bunch tomorrow. I'm going out for the evening, so I'm not going to get a chance to play with her until I have 2 copies accumulated. But I'll probably try her out a little bit tonight, and I'm very, very excited to see what people come up with for her and what kind of things that people do. But overall, a solid, solid value card. Seems like she's really well equipped for everything that you want to do with her. She may not be an absolute bomb, but I think that she just fits so well in that 7 slot that if you have a reason to put a big 7-drop unit into your deck, then Tesya's a pretty good spot to put her in. Like, just gonna do some interesting things. A lot of unreliability to her kit, a lot of things where she's not always gonna give you all of her benefits, but the fact that she's just a 7/6 for 7 means that even when that doesn't happen, probably going to feel pretty okay about it. She's probably still going to be something that you can draw at the top later on or play out later on and feel not at all bad about. She does something on board, so the slower mid-rangey decks will be very, very happy with her, and maybe some mid-rangey token decks will come as a result of her. I happen to be a big fan of mid-rangey token decks. I like Claw of the First Dragon fun. I like all sorts of things involving like Moment of Creation and assembly lines and just sort of playing like really, really slow Praxis, and I kind of am interested in the Combre Party archetypes, so all of those are interesting concepts as well. But yeah, like overall, I'm very, very positive on Tesya. I'm excited by her design, I'm really excited by her art, and I'm very, very glad to see her added to Eternal. We'll have some more card breakdowns for you this week, and I'm also going to be doing some brews with Tesya, no doubt. So I will see you guys next time with those. Thank you so much for watching. Feel free to like or subscribe if you like this video, and I will see you next time. Cheers!